Thank you very much for the question. I think that when you approach a strategy, you need to think very carefully about the kinds of tactics that you would utilize. So the overall strategic intention might be to advocate for democracy and support its presence on the African continent. However, if your tactic is to approach African countries and say that, listen, you must be democratic, and use our model, it works. I think it's bound to lead to some failure. I do agree with Tony that all countries and peoples deserve the right to exercise their civil and political rights. But I think, given history, the approach has to be somewhat different. And I would recommend a greater attention to tools that Africans have developed, such as the African peer review mechanism, as a way into broader discussions about governance and democracy, rather than we will. There are 44 African countries that have now agreed to be transparent and evaluated under the African peer review mechanism principles of democracy and good governance. An extremely important tool. We've already had over 40 such evaluations. Let's discuss the outcomes of those reviews with each of the African countries and look at areas where it was found there are gaps that must be addressed, and look at how we work together. And in that way, you build a platform toward the objective you eventually seek to achieve. But to come in and seek to teach a country that, we know how democracy functions, and we've come to tell you, you do it, it will work for you. I think it leads to defeat. So we need to think in different ways. I also think that one of the lessons we also need to learn and perhaps draw lessons from, one of the experiences we should draw lessons from, is the reality that there has been a lot of external interference in Africa. And a lot of that external interference has fueled conflict in many African countries, has fueled instability, has supported opposition groups against liberation fighters, and so on. You know the history, perhaps better than myself. This is a reality. So in my view, while there may be concern about Wagner Group or Van Dijk, which is another security group which was in Mozambique, there's also a concern about countries that have mineral interests in African countries and are there as a destabilizing force. So I think we need to look at the full plethora of problems that give rise to insecurity, bad governance, and the absence of democracy on the African continent. It's not a one-country problem. It's a world phenomenon which results from Africa's rich mineral wealth that has made it a significant target of external players that don't always have the interests of Africa at heart.